Elric of Melnibone, it is the best dark fantasy series out there. It's the best pal, trust me, with the Melnibonians and Ymir, the Dreaming City. But the origins of these two things aren't really that clear. First of all, let's look at Melnibonians. Let's look at the race that inspired Dark Elves, Arthas, and the Valerians from Game of Thrones. And that's the Melnibonians. Now, their origins are contradictory, because there are two accounts of how the Melnibonians ended up in this twisted situation that they're in. First of all, it's basically... The first version basically says that Melnibonians came from a place known as Rilin Kren A, where the High Ones meet, as a translation. A city on an island in the jungle-covered western continent. The people of said city were peaceful by nature, but the lords of the higher worlds wanted the location for a meeting. In exchange for giving up the city, the royal family received Ariok's patronage. Now, when I say lords of the higher worlds, what I mean by that is the angels, gods, and goddesses of the multiverse that encompasses Elric. That includes the lords of the law, the forces of singularity, the chaos lords and the chaos engineers, the grey lords of neutrality, and possibly the lost gods, dead gods, and a few others. But in this case, it was the chaos lords. And so the king gave his city to Ariok. Some of the refugees went as far as the Sorcerer's Isles. Others went to Melnibone, where the dragons were already living. And there, they founded Ymir itself, that was built 2 centuries after they settled the island. And so we got Melnibonians and Melnibone itself. Now, another different interpretation of this story comes from the ghost of Sardik, Elric's father. And this account is interesting because it says that the Melnibonians were aligned to the cosmic balance, and they lived in 2 cities, Ymir and Huishan. Now, the 2 cities disagreed where to shift over to chaos and accept the patronage of Ariok, or to shift over to law or remain neutral. And a great civil war started that lasted, surprisingly, only 3 days. Melnibone got pretty roughed up. The city was left in ruins, but inhabitants of Huishan, the supporters of the balanced side, were all exterminated, all killed. Again, this is the version that Saldric tells Elric, and Saldric claims that the dead are able to discern the truth. In both versions, in both interpretations of this story of how we got Melnibonians, the ending is the same. The Melnibonians become slaves to chaos and get twisted over time, making them cruel and aggressive instead of peaceful. There are other elements that change in time. For example, this alliance with Ariok made the Ymirians, the Melnibonians, masters of the known world for millennia. Besides the support they got from this chaos god, they enjoyed numerous other advantages. Natural command over magic, dragons that they managed to tame in a way, their impressive battle barges controlling the seas, and sometimes even the terrifying swords Stormbringer and Mournblade, wielded by the Bright Emperors. Now, granted, they had some resistance at some point. The first human civilization that attempted to challenge Melnibone 8,000 years ago didn't end that well. Their whole fertile empire was turned into a desert, but its main city survived. Now let's look at Ymir itself, the capital of the Melnibonian Empire. And here we can find the Ruby Throne, the greatest throne specifically created for the Emperor of Melnibone. Now the city itself is more of a coastal city protected on the seaward side by a great labyrinth known as the Sea Maze. Excavated into the cliff, that guards the city inland harbor. This is a pretty important defense, and very few are able to penetrate it. And the only way you can really penetrate it is if there's somebody that knows the way through the maze. As you can imagine, humans and others don't know how to navigate it, but Melnibonians do. So it is a pretty impressive defense system, if the possibility of betrayal doesn't scare you. Also, when somebody manages to get into the water, they have to deal with the immense battle barges of Ymir and the dragons. All of those powerful defenses in themselves. The Empire of Melnibone, and including Ymir, does do trade with the lesser kingdoms, the young kingdoms of humans. Now, of course, said kingdoms also try to raise the great city for its vast wealth, because it truly is a kingdom of vast wealth, an El Dorado of fantasy worlds, if you want. Now, some might wonder, why is Ymir called the Dreaming City? And that's a funny one, because the nickname comes from the fact that many Melnibonians, from nobles to slaves to merchants to people that don't really have a job, have active dream lives. And what I mean by this is that they get high thanks to enhanced plans and certain drugs. It is in these dreams that Melnibonians find the greatest pleasure in their lives, thanks to plans and drugs. Slaves in particular have come to depend on their dreams as a coping mechanism, a way to escape from their unfortunate reality, which by design has made them more easily controllable by their masters. It's a vicious cycle, and sometimes, in certain rituals, it's better to be in your own dreams than in the real world. This sounds like a nice place to live, but I have an important question. What happens in other cities? Why is there no talk about them? Well, you see, my friend, there are no other cities when it comes to Melnibone. They did try to colonize and get and create other cities to expand the empire, but those cities have been lost to time, natural disasters, and wars. Ymir stands not only as the capital, but as the sole city of Melnibone. In a way, you can say it is pretty much a city-state, but one with such important wealth and such power that it eclipses normal kingdoms, or what we understand as kingdoms. Now we also have to look at the bad part. As Melnibonians became more lazy and corrupted, their great empire started to become more and more raided by the young kingdoms, to the point where Elric would leave because he made a bad pact, and then he would come back and raid it again to save his lover, basically destroying Ymir in the following raid. Many Melnibonians got crushed, and unfortunately Elric's raiders, the people that fought alongside him, also met their end to the last there, Elric being the only one that escaped, and the few Melnibonians that were still left. And that's the story of Ymir, the Dreaming City.